let's get started. Let's just go around the room very, very briefly and do your very short introduction, who you are and the startup you work for, and then we'll go into talking to each other. So why don't we start with Rebecca, who I can see on my top right corner.
Cool. Okay, so my name is Rebecca. I work for the food tech startup called Climato, where our mission is to reduce the global impact that comes from the food we're serving. And actually, Donnie was one of our first business coaches at KTH Innovation. So I'm really excited to be here today.
Happy to have you, and great to see Climato succeeding as well out there. Really well done so far. Katharina, do you want to say something?
Yes, sure. Lovely to be here, and thanks for the invitation. I'm Katharina Paoli Brunat. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Nudged. We are a SaaS platform, and we use behavioral science to establish climate-friendly habits using a Nobel Prize-winning method called nudging from behavioral psychology. So everyone knows we need more behavioral change in the world, and we're here to show that it doesn't have to be that hard. So we're trying to make sustainable choices easy and building the world's leading platform for that.
Cool. Thank you very much. And then, of course, we have Miyabi in the studio.
Hi, everyone. My name is Miyabi Holm. I'm the founder and CEO of Bahini. It's a fashion startup that's focusing on helping survivors of sex trafficking. Founded here in Sweden, and we're currently helping survivors in Nepal. And I'm also working together with Entrepreneurs Without Borders to scale up Bahini globally.
Yes. Thank you. And let's see, Clint, are you there?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. It's Clint Bartlett here, coming from South Africa. Sorry you can't see me, but I can see all your lovely smiling faces. I've been in the social finance impact investing world for almost 20 years now, and particularly interested on innovative finance to emerging markets.
Wonderful. And Clint has actually been with us every year for this annual event as well. So thank you, Clint, for always being there for Entrepreneurs Without Borders. Happy to have you here this year again. And as I said before, if there's anybody that wants to join in the discussion as we go along now, just raise your hand and we'll grab you into the discussion as well. So let's see, did we just check if we got Nonso online? No, we didn't. He's coming back, hopefully.
We never showed our
I can do that. Let's do that. Let's bring them in as well. Add you to the stream. So I have you there. Okay, wonderful. So if you want to say anything, feel free to join the discussion. Anyway, so I want to bounce this off the starting short keynote I gave of pushing the limit there when it comes to the boundaries, when it comes to redefining entrepreneurship. And I'd love to hear your take on it, and at least start with sort of where you are today and how you are working, not only maybe towards one thing, but how you see yourself in a bigger context as sustainably oriented. Anyone?
Yes. So when I first started Bahini, my mission was to support survivors of sex trafficking. So it's human rights focused and women empowerment focused. However, I didn't want to make any too big footsteps on our planet because our whole business model was to actually produce scarves. So in doing that, I also wanted to ensure that it was sustainably made, and also that the workers also throughout the whole supply chain were taken care of, and we're working in a fair trade certified suppliers as well. So just like Donnie also said, that we can't only focus on one area and then damaging all the other areas in the UN SDG goals. We also need to focus on all of these. So throughout my whole journey of starting Bahini, I realized that there's a lot of greenwashing all over and a lot of certificates that can be falsified. So it's really hard as an entrepreneur. It's not impossible, but it's hard to juggle all that, and because it's a jungle to go through all of these steps to ensure that it's a really sustainable business that you're starting. I would love to hear everyone else.
Yeah, I'm actually jumping. I'm looking at Katharina here. Sorry, Rebecca, I can see you sort of leaning in towards the screen there, but I want to go to Katharina because, of course, your comments on what I said and what you just heard, but also I want to hear your take on the whole sort of greenwashing thing as well, because I know that and she's going, don't get me started, but Well, I'll let Katharina, you start, and then we can continue on that then.
Yeah, I mean, that's the main reason why I started Nudged in the first place. I was so frustrated about people just talking about sustainability, but not actually doing anything. So that was my frustration. That was the building ground for this company. And I think as a company, you have both we have a great opportunity if we start a company being sustainable, because in the future we are the companies that will survive and flourish. But also, I think we have a moral obligation to be sustainable as a company, because we only have 7 years to turn this around when it comes to climate change, and we really need to do something, and we need to act now. So I think that's our obligation to do our part of it.
Yeah, and you work with helping, well, large and small organizations sort of nudge their way towards a better future. Hopefully without, I'm not saying without, oh, it's a terrible thing to say. I don't mean without understanding what I'm doing themselves, but the whole, no, but it's, it's about getting people to move direction.
Yeah, it's using psychology and design and behavioral science. So everything that is intuitive to us as human beings, because I don't think that sustainable choices should be that hard. We very often talk about sustainability and climate change as something that is super difficult and super long progress and takes time to change. And of course it does, but we can also do a lot of things right here, right now. And all those tiny, small changes and small nudges can make a huge difference if we just do it, basically.
Yeah. And now Rebecca, then, jumping to Rebecca as well.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to follow up on what Katharina just mentioned about the small steps. So basically what we're doing at Climato is that we calculate the carbon footprint of the food, the CO2 emissions, and then we communicate this to consumers, or that restaurants can communicate on their menus and big corporations and so forth, so that everyone can take these small decisions. Okay, maybe should I eat something with meat or something more plant-based, and they can kind of see the difference through the data we have provided them from the climate impact. So I'm totally up to what you're saying, Katharina, about the small changes and giving the information and the correct data about it.
Clint, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. Can I get a comment from you as well?
So as you know, Donnie, I'm quite interested in how to fund sustainable entrepreneurship. I focus a lot on the finance and on how easy it is to get access for these entrepreneurs to access the kind of appropriate finance. I agree a lot with the micro changes that are necessary that hopefully bring about much bigger changes. I think that we are running out of time, there's no doubt. Sometimes I'm very hopeful, sometimes I wallow in despair. It depends kind of on what day of the week it is. My main concern is that there are so-called kind of structural problems that I think we face. So if you think about structural inequalities, if you think about structural boundaries or barriers to finance, those things are real and they exist, and they need to be dismantled much quicker than I think we're able to. So I think on the one hand, we need to have those kind of questions that you mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. I'm concerned that too many people don't think about them deeply enough. And so we need both tools of nudging as well as the big kind of policy tools, the big kind of grandiose statements almost, and the two need to work in concert with each other. Otherwise, I'm worried we're not going to get where we need to go.
I really just want to second that, because even though I am really pro nudging, as you all know, it's not the solution to all the problems in the world. Even there is behavioral challenges within all the SDGs, but we need technology, we need policy, we need systemic change in a bigger scale, and everyone needs to do their part, definitely.
Yeah.
If I also just could add to that, we were just at the UN Climate Conference in Glasgow this last couple of weeks, where we climate label all the food at the UN Climate Conference. And we were a bit shocked that the politicians and the people on the higher level taking the decisions was not aware of the food's impact and so forth, and that they actually were serving lots of food with a high climate impact. So I think, again, it's important to have these initiatives on a higher level as well that can be leaders and could inspire the rest of us to reach our long-term visions for 2030.
Thank you. Nonso, I see you're with us again. Thank you. Sorry for all the bad connections. Just if you could just introduce yourself and say shortly what you're working on.
Okay, first I have to first apologize for my connection problem. I had to switch from my computer to my mobile. My name is Nonso, like Donnie mentioned, and I'm the founder and CEO of Sosocare. And I believe in the mission of sustainable entrepreneurship. And just for example, look at the case of what we do in Nigeria. Like millions of people who live in developing countries in Africa and Asia, my country, Nigeria, faces huge problem, two very big problems, actually. First, we worry about over 180 million people who don't have access to health insurance. That's like 170, that's like 80% of the population. Again, we also have to look at, well, environmental pollution. Nigeria generates like 30,000 tons of waste and about 20 billion plastic bottles, of which less than 5% is collected and recycled. So as a company, one of the things we do is we understand that these both problems are huge and catastrophic. So to look at sustainability and impact, what we try to do is we thought of how best can we use one of the problems to tackle the other problem. So we created Sosocare as a low-cost micro-health insurance that aims to enable low-income people to exchange recyclables as an alternative to finance their premium. That way you ensure that the environment is clean, and as well you ensure that people have access to healthcare. So when you are measuring the impact, that means you look at infant and maternal mortality is reduced, sanitation is encouraged, and plastics are mopped up of the environment. This has been our mission, and we continue to do it to ensure that we protect our climate and we give people alternative way of financing their healthcare. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for joining the call. And I think the Sosocare solution is it might sound simple, but it's a genius way of actually helping help people that can't afford to collect recyclables and then for that get healthcare, and then you're sort of the exchange there in between. And I know that it's not, it's just not coming up. Everybody knows it's not just coming up with the idea, it's actually executing on the idea that counts. And I know that you've been doing a lot of footwork down there, Nonso. So job well done so far, really. But I want to come back to the discussion as well and talk about, because we've mentioned this systematic shift that we need as well. And I know that Clint, going back to you again, last year we talked a lot about the trade-off needed when we talked about impact investing and investing, and we have to start accepting a trade-off that it's not just the big cash in. We have to understand that we have to also factor in a very big factor of social, of worldly. Planetary health is a new expression that I've learned the last couple of months as well. So, Clint, any comments on that?
Yeah, Donnie, when you opened the session describing the kinds of companies that we need to see, creating jobs, creating kind of flourishing communities, and stepping into the vacuum left by either incompetent or just absent states, or stepping into the holes created by the worst of capitalism. The responsibility to fill those social gaps fall on the businesses. Hence, we call them social responsible businesses or social entrepreneurs or societal entrepreneurs. But that cost is not insignificant, and somebody has to bear that cost, the cost of building a kind of flourishing society. And the problem is that cost has to be borne by the entity, and that money, basically, there's only a finite amount of money that entity needs to generate. So it can't both cover the cost that society and the rest of us put on it, and at the same time generate a return which is so-called market-based return, which ignores this trade-off. It ignores the cost necessary that this entity needs to bear. And so this notion that the market rate is a kind of I don't want to use the word sacred, but people seem to work along this idea of a market rate as if it's absolute and it's unchangeable and it's all knowing and it's almost omnipotent. And in that sense, it's actually sometimes extractive. It's not a neutral based instrument. So I'm very interested in how we have an expected return which is more appropriate to the society that we want, rather than a kind of traditional, conventional, and at the core of it, unsustainable way of understanding return.
And a comment on that, Jess, and feel free to jump in if you have anything, and of course, feel free to jump in, panel over here as well. A comment on that is, but how could we, because I mean, it's easy to talk about that you make an investment and then you also sort of feel good about it. But could we put that into a more, I don't know, systemic approach, some kind of infrastructural approach as well, so we can somehow, I don't know, measure it, because what you can measure is done there, as I say. I mean, how can we actually move it from, I'm going to invest in things that make me feel good, into actually sort of also being, as you say, a new way of measuring it per se?
Yeah, so
Clint?
we have lots of metrics that the world has spent many hours and weeks and years kind of creating. So it's not as if we don't know what the end goal looks like. I mean, we kind of have a general understanding of what flourishing societies look like, and at the very base or superficial level, we have 17 goals to articulate it. So in that sense, the end goal is not that complicated. I think the problem that I have is that the kind of actors that channel money, the kind of stewards of capital, eventually it's the money that'll change people's behavior, it'll change companies' behavior. And to the extent that this notion of market return is under investigated, or it's not considered deep enough, with regards to your questions, that is my worry. So I mean, I could spend hours going into the more granular details, but I think that the point that I want to leave is that a lot of the kind of financiers remain within their notion of, this is the market rate, this is the expected return, this is what we need to get, and it's everybody else's job to make sure that we get it. I mean, I'm being a little bit cheeky here, but I'm doing it on purpose. So it's the development banks, it's the philanthropists, it's the social entrepreneurs. Everybody else needs to kind of come to the table and de-risk my finance so that I can get what I need, kind of thing. So that is, I think, where a lot of the debate needs to still occur.
Yeah. And going back to the other panelists here, Katharina, I know that you work with both what is sort of very tangible things that people might sort of see on the street, but I also know that you do work on kind of a high level approach as well, and getting organizations sort of to shift over time. Any comments from you on this when it comes to like the systematic shifts that we need to do to make things work better?
Well, first of all, when it comes to investments and funding, I would say that it's been, for many years, it's been the talk about the rise of the impact funds, and also philanthropy is playing a big role for the future. I would say that since for many years, it's been totally okay to make money out of doing bad things for the world. Why wouldn't it be okay to make money out of doing good things for the world? And I think that's the future. We need to focus on that. A sustainable business needs to also be profitable. And so we don't only have, it shouldn't be impact investing, it should be investing. And the investment funds should basically look at sustainability as one of the core values for a profitable company that will give them return on investment in the future. So that's what I think on that level. Yeah. Other than that, I also think that, well, coming from behavioral change, I think that is also necessary in business models today. So we worked, for example, developing business models for other companies where behavioral change is a crucial part, for example, to put things in a circular business model instead of a linear one. So that is also something we can look into for the future. I think many companies, there's a lot of opportunity and potential that is not developed yet there.
Mm-hmm. And then bouncing up to Rebecca, I know that you, for anybody that didn't catch that, getting the what do you call it, the climate, what do you call what you do?
Yeah, you can call it different names, but we calculating the carbon impact or CO2 impact or carbon footprint. There are many different words.
Yeah, and I know that you started out by actually adding it to menus, which is I think this is an interesting thing, because you started out adding it to menus, and then we saw restaurants actually changing the order of the food on the menu, so they ranked it from most to least climate friendly food, and they saw then the shift in the people which food they chose in the day,
and that was like nudge, by the way.
Yes, that's a nudge, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah, points for nudging there. Perfect. But the thing was, the interesting thing there was also then when you started working with like chains of restaurants, that maybe, and this is, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, but maybe it started as something they felt they wanted to help, our customers, they can choose a more climate-friendly food, but then they actually realized that they were cutting costs as well, and they were actually also really making carbon impact, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really great case you mentioning there, Donnie. And I think coming back to this part by also tracking everything and knowing your customers' behaviors and so forth, is that we realized when we're starting to label the menus and also tracking how many climate-friendly meals you're selling, and the difference between like the month before when you didn't label the menu until you started to label the menu is huge. So I'm definitely with you here about changing the behaviors and tracking everything, and why you should invest in sustainable solutions, because people want to buy from companies that are doing great things and are transparent. So I think this is also an investment to get your customers on board and attract a new kind of scene of customers as well.
Well, let's to make it a bit hard on us then. Let's talk about the trade-offs, because any business that starts, and I know this from seeing a lot of businesses start where I work in my daily basis, and then everybody goes, we're going to be a 100% sustainable company, there's no plastics, and it's going to be fantastic. And then as they get going, you see the compromises that they have to do just to make it work, and it's trade-offs. So let's talk about some trade-offs then. Which sort of conflicts have you had in yourselves and your businesses when it comes to, I wanted to start a really sustainable business, but I had to make some trade-offs to make it work? Miyabi.
So with Bahini, I learned as I went. I didn't have any experience with human rights or fair trade production before I actually started Bahini. So I learned that the costs, of course, would be higher to purchase products and order products from factories when they are actually giving their workers a decent pay and have good work conditions. And it's almost like 10 or 20 times the price from mass-produced things from big factories where they're not paying their workers a decent pay. So that also ends up with the end product being much more expensive, and having that to communicate to the end consumer and explain why our products are more expensive than something that's fast fashion. It is a struggle, because it's not all consumers who are available to buy something for more money. They might want to do good, but they don't have that kind of wallet as well. So that's a struggle. And I noticed that a lot of my friends who also were starting businesses within fashion, that they actually went on another route. They couldn't keep up with the fair trade production and have those high costs for buying products. So they went on a road where they actually wanted to have salaries, of course. And just like Donnie said, to be a sustainable business or social entrepreneur, you end up being a charity, because you can't give yourself a salary. So that's where I ended up. And so that's why I'm also taking the help of Entrepreneurs Without Borders to get a help with changing the business model slightly, and maybe also changing the product slightly to be able to scale up globally and also pay myself and others a salary, except for the workers in the factory. So it is hard. It's a higher cost in the beginning, at least. And hopefully by consumers buying more and more sustainable products, we can actually have that production being much more popular, so that the fast fashion is not as popular in the future.
Yeah, but I mean that's the thing, right? Because we're always faced with the fact that organic is more expensive, and the fair trade is more expensive, and then you have this story about when it's 6:05 you're on your way home and everybody wants to eat, you just grab something and the cheapest one possible, and then in the end people buy the cheap one anyway, and that because and no offense to any brands being mentioned, but there's a reason there's a dollar store in every city, right? Because it's the cheapest place to go to buy stuff. And my kind of ironic joke is that, the local politician standing behind one of the residents of that small city, complaining to each other that, it's a pity that all the mom and pop shops in the center of the city are closing down and the death of our small city, they say while they're lining up to pay for their goods at dollar store. So, it's, the kind of the whole thing there. But coming back to trade-offs then, Katharina or Rebecca, what have trade-offs you've had to do or felt that where you had to make a choice and maybe made a harder choice because you wanted to stick to where you were or had to do something else for a shorter win, whatever, anything? I mean, it's not all roses.
I can jump in there. I'm thinking about two different things, but one is to what extent do you serve your clients? If you know that the best impact for the world is not really the policy that your client have. That is something that I've been through a couple of times. So we only take assignments and clients within the Sustainable Development Goals. So we don't work with any behavioral challenges outside of Sustainable Development Goals. So that is our framework, so to say. So outside of that, it's easy to say no to a client that wants us to work with behavioral change for something else. But within that, there's also all these different layers that sometimes, for example, if we once had an oil company coming to us asking for help to become more climate friendly. What do we do? I don't want to work for an oil company. I don't want to, have them on my list of clients. At the same time, we need them to make some change. Same goes for the entire car industry. We know that we should bike and use public transport instead. But if we can make the car industry greener, that's a benefit for the entire planet and for everyone. So that type of trade-offs is really difficult sometimes. I feel.
Yeah, if I could continue on that conversation that Katharina mentioned we had kind of exactly the same trade-offs because we are calculating the carbon impact for all type of restaurants. And we also had some requests from oil companies in their canteens if we could climate label their food at the oil stations. And we have having these discussions a lot, but our conclusion is that we want to provide this kind of information of the climate impact. So we don't want to point fingers at anyone serving meat. We just want to contribute with information and the knowledge for them to take like a more informed decision. But I guess this is a bit of a dilemma and something we've been discussing a lot. But I guess that's a big trade-off.
Yeah. Let's see if we got Nonso back as well.
And if I may add,
go ahead. Please go ahead. Go ahead, Katharina.
Thank you. If I may add, something that I think that most startups, at least, have as a trade-off is goal number 4, health. To be a sustainable company, you also need to have sustainability in your work environment, and not being too stressful, not also taking care of your staff and their health. And I don't think I'm the only one who have had to make trade-offs on that because it's just really, really hectic to be a startup, basically.
But that's actually a really important point that I feel that we don't stress enough, because we're, this again, coming back to my sort of original keynote as well, where we talked about this myth about the lone entrepreneur, the man or the woman that's, fighting through and making it and succeeding and perceiving and fighting and battling. And we talk too little about the actual, as you say, the mental health of everybody and the people. And for everybody that succeeds, there's another a lot of people that don't, and how is everybody feeling? And I have a very recent example of that for working with a very big consulting company, and it was let's say it's a clash of cultures, because it was another country that has a different kind of work culture than Sweden has. They're used to very long days and more used to that as long as you're at your desk, you're working. And the more hours you are at your desk, the better you are working. Whereas I might say that it's a big difference between being at work and actually working. So I don't care if you're there for 4 hours. If you do a good job and deliver, then hey, that's fine with me. And we had actually had a bit of a culture clash in that, when they were expecting longer hours, longer days to perform, and I was, and that was not really where I was. So I totally agree with you, Katharina, on the health part for entrepreneurs as well. But that maybe that's something that we in Sweden then sort of take for granted, and it's maybe easy for us, but in the rest of the world it's a different thing. I mean, for when we say sustainability in Sweden, there might be, it's a different dimension to that when I know Nonso or maybe Clint talks about sustainability in Nigeria or South Africa. Nonso, I mean, there's a comment from you on the sustainability as such, for you sort of working in Nigeria as an entrepreneur. See, I can't hear you there, Nonso.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Oh, okay. Well, a couple of things I have to say is that sustainability works here, but for example, if you look at my country, Nigeria, we've been on this program for an hour. That means for every 7 minutes, a woman will have to lose her life trying to have a child. And such deaths could be averted if people like this have access to quality healthcare. Again, policymakers are not really interested on how you could simplify these things and be able to, design a simple way to finance healthcare for people. But when we approach them, what we let them understand is that waste pile up in an environment, it creates environmental pollution. How best can we create a sustainable solution to finance these things without having to incur more cost on you? So that way we can, provide quality healthcare for low-income people, which have more impact on their healthcare access and also on the governmental side in terms of environmental sustainability. So for us as a business, sustainability is what drives us, and we also make our income to sustain a level of profit to sustain the business and what we do.
Clint, I know you have a good sort of view of what's the bigger African context as well. Any comment from you on what we're talking about here?
Yeah, I think a couple of ones. The first is that the societal gaps that we face are obviously hugely different in an African context to, say, a European context. I mean, generalizing a lot, but I think that you can't deny that. I think the other thing to say is I am a capitalist. I have been trained in finance in various ways. So I believe that the hope rests within the stewards of capital that I referred to earlier. So I wasn't attempting to kind of pillar them, but I do think that we can speak about entrepreneurs, we can speak about even policymakers, but I think up until the time that the capital changes or flows differently, I think we're not going to be able to get much done. I think the example of the menu and the carbon credits of the food is a fantastic metaphor. I think that we have been, the capitalist system in an unfettered way gets you to go into a restaurant and you are supposed to leave the restaurant having eaten everything that you possibly can. And so you've got one job, you must eat everything, and you've got one measure, which is you must feel that you cannot possibly eat anymore. That, I think, has been the kind of capitalist system that has brought us to where we are today. Now, Rebecca is being able to show you that when you eat 6 courses instead of 3, the consequence of you eating the additional 3, we can now evidence that. And in economics terms, we could call that a negative externality. But what Rebecca also shows is that for the first 3 courses, because you're going to pay a little bit extra, there's going to be, let's say, 3 or 4 farmers who are going to be able to pay their staff better, and that's a positive externality. So this notion of being able to evidence these different consequences, both good and bad, that I think is where our hope lies. And I think it's without that kind of thinking, without that kind of detail, we won't be able to change the way in which finance works. And worse than that, the finance holders will be able to hide behind not doing wrong, or hide behind other kind of low hurdles without actually making the much bigger differences that we're trying to. Because of course, when you leave a restaurant and you've had 3 courses and not 6, you're not going to die from starvation. We have been socialized into accepting a certain degree of return that is maximizing. It's a maximizing function, so it's easy to maximize something because you ignore everything else. So we have been socialized into believing that that's the way it should be, and that's why trade-offs are necessary, inverted commas, evils. But of course, if we look deeper, we realize that the trade-offs are not evils. The trade-offs are necessary to sustain our existence.
Yeah, but how do we get to a point and place where we move away from the maximizing sort of mindset and grab all you can while you're at it, the whole sort of buffet, and you overload your plate even though you won't even eat half of it. You probably throw half of it away as well. If we're continuing with the restaurant analogies here, how do we get to a point where we make, how do we do it? Help?
I have a suggestion. I'm not sure I have the how do you say, the bullet to solve everything.
The silver bullet.
Yeah,
the silver bullet.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. But I do know that we need a new set of norms. As working with behavioral change, we very often talk about the social norms in the society and how we follow what everyone else is doing. It's called herd mentality, or group pressure, or what do you want to call it. But if we can set a new norm, pointing at the new behaviors and the new type of systemic change we want to see, and definitely you're also showing that this is what everyone wants as the new norm, and this is how we're supposed to behave for the future. I think that's where we also can see that systemic change. It will be difficult because someone else always needs to start, and then, but in the end, when the majority feels that this is the right way, then the behavior and the system will also change. I can take an example also back to the food industry, basically. But sometimes when you talk about social norms, you very often say, well, we don't have 9 out of 10 doing this way, so how can we communicate that this is the new norm? Because it's not the majority behaving in a certain way. But a few years ago, there were big headlines in the media in Sweden, where a new report came out saying that 10% of Swedes were vegetarians. Everyone setting the standard, saying, like, the headlines were saying, like, the new norm, vegetarianism is the new norm. And still it was only 10%, 9 out of 10 still it wasn't vegetarians, but it was communicated as the new norm. And now a few years later, they're even more than 10%. So if we can just use that type of nudging techniques or behavioral psychology, I think we have a lot to win.
Yeah. Let's see, we had a comment from Annette.
Yes, you do. And adding to what Clint said, and I think I'll bring up what Donnie kicked off with, and Katharina, you've been around. So move out of the restaurant and food industry and look upon it from the finance and investor perspective. I think you're onto something when you talk about not the social entrepreneurship equal to no profits, but doing good and sustainable entrepreneurship is actually about making profit, and that is acceptable. That should be the new norm. So I think, Clint, I'll add to the fire, but I do think we're onto something here, that sustainable entrepreneurship is about doing good and making profit.
Doing good and making profit. Thank you for that comment there as well. I will add to that, and I will also an analogy when it comes to what Katharina said when it came to the new norm. You said the new norm. There was only 10%, but I bet you that a lot of people saw that headline and said, maybe I should try vegetarian tonight. That sounds like a new thing. Because I always talk about the difference between market share and mental share. When Apple released the iPhone, when they were still only like 5% an iPhone market share, they were 75% mental share because everybody was talking about the iPhone and everybody wanted an iPhone. Tesla, what do they sell? Like 2% of the world's cars? But everybody knows Tesla and everybody sort of kind of wants a Tesla. So there's a huge, difference between market share and mental share. And if we could get it to a point where we can actually make it as cool and new and modern and new normie to do what we're talking about here, we'll come a long way in doing it, I think. But it's yes, Katharina.
Another great example of that is actually the design of the Sustainable Development Goals that Jakob is the father for, because by making the design so very tangible for everyone, it's also something that all of a sudden everyone was talking about Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, and for me it was from one year to the other. I've been in the environmental movement and climate movement for many, many years and working with sustainability. And then all of a sudden, someone was talking about these goals. And it was not when they decided on them. It was not when they first started to communicate them. It was when the design came out. And we could see all this colorful and this really tangible design of it. And all of a sudden, everyone could have a visual picture of a common goal that we all could agree on. So it's a great example of how to communicate something so that everyone sees that this is our new common goal that we should address all together.
To add also to that, we always say to our customers that we work with the restaurants that it needs to look like appealing and the menus need to look sexy for people to choose the vegan options and so forth. So I'm definitely agreeing what you say, that the communication is so key.
It's also, if I may, it's also about exactly what you guys are saying. It's about making sure that the narrative is what we want it to be, and not allow incumbents to kind of hijack the narrative. It's very easy to caricature, what we're talking about. As tree huggers or people who work in the non-profit space, they're just stupid. They don't know what else to do with their lives, kind of thing. It's very easy to do that. You can throw that mud easily, and unfortunately, it sticks because the rest of us don't wash it off. So for me, it's very much about what Annette was saying. It's never about, and Donnie, you said this in the beginning, it's never about not making profit. That would be an absurdity. It's about making, the question is the level of profit we're talking about. Obviously, if you're going to maximize profit, nothing is going to change. So it's a case of finding the, inverted commas, sustainable balance between making zero and making what we're all have been kind of force-fed into believing this is what we need in order to survive.
Thank you for that. I'm just looking at the time here. We have time for one round of comments from all of the panelists, and then we will move on to the last keynote of the day. But I will just say, let's hear from every one of you when it comes to moving forward. And I want you all to come back here, either live with us or online at 2022 on December 14th for Sustainable Entrepreneurship Day again. And, what do we do until then? What are you going to do until then? I mean, what can to move things forward and really help move this forward now? Anyone? We'll go around the room. Anyone want to start?
I'll start. Sorry,
Go ahead, Clint.
Donnie, okay, all right. No, I mean, I think my job is to agitate. So, I try and have these conversations with many capital holders. Sometimes it doesn't work because one comes across as really antagonistic or bombastic kind of thing. But I think we're running out of time for the kind of polite discussion that we've had, decades after decades kind of thing. And so for me, my to-do list, apart from seeing you next year in person, which would be lovely, is to continue to kind of push and agitate and to get people to think about things, especially when they when their positions are based on assumptions or statements which are so stale and so old that they've forgotten to question them.
Thank you.
I think,
Katharina.
yeah, I can
Okay.
continue there and saying then if your job is to educate, my job is to nudge people in the right direction. And by doing that in three ways that is really important, I think. First of all, we need hands-on solutions. No fluff anymore, not just talking, action. And second one, I think sustainable choices needs to be easy. We need to communicate them that it's easy, and we need to give those friendly reminders and design our society so sustainability is easy. And the third is we need to create measurable impact. We really don't have time for anything that is not measurable and doesn't create impact.
If I just continue to that, I think we will be the solution that creates like an easy solution, hands-on solution to these kind of problems, where you can measure everything from the start to the finish line, and basically encourage people to take these kind of small steps, that you don't need to have everything figured out to work with sustainability, that you can take one step at a time.
Yeah,
Cool.
to add a little to what they said, I believe in the power of communication and measuring impact. For example, here in Nigeria, for example, as a business, what we're able to do is we went into partnership with the government to recycle 13,000 tons of waste to provide health insurance for 120,000 people. So we can leverage on that, scale it across like 11 to 10 more states across the country. So it's the power of action and measuring the impact. So everybody could see where you are able to make a change that is visible, that they can see with their physical eye.
And to create transparency and also awareness about what people can do as a consumer. And just like you said, Rebecca, one step at a time, so you don't get overwhelmed. And to just create this awareness by nudging would be amazing too. Yeah.
Miyabi, Katharina, Rebecca, Nonso, and Clint, thank you so very much for spending, almost 45 minutes, an hour with us here today. And I will welcome you. Please stay on the broadcast, but we'll welcome you back, of course, for the day in 2022. Hopefully we can meet in person then, everybody, for the big event. And I will actually also ask you, so what have you done the last year to move things forward and moved on that commitment? With that, I will say thank you so much for the panel discussion, and thank you very much for the panelists over there. And I will now, let's